Hello everyone, my name is Taylor Smith and I will be going over the War of 1812, which actually was from the years 1812 to 1815. I have two questions to start off my presentation today, and just think about them and then we'll go over them at the end of my presentation. So the first question is, who was President of the United States during the War of 1812? We have four options here: A. Andrew Jackson, B. James Madison, C. James Monroe, or D. Thomas Jefferson. My second question is, what ended the War of 1812? We have A. Burlingame Treaty, B. Oregon Treaty, C. Treaty of Ghent, or D. Treaty of Limits. So we're just going to watch a short video clip that summarizes the War of 1812, and then we'll go more into depth about these events in the rest of my presentation today.
Here's another 2-minute history report.
When you think about wars fought here in America, there's the Civil War, and of course the American Revolution. But what do you know about the one in the middle, War of 1812? In the early years of building our nation, European countries viewed the U.S. as weak. The Army was small and the Navy had little respect. Great Britain was regularly declaring impressment, forcing sailors from random ships into joining their Royal Navy. In 1807, the USS Chesapeake was attacked by Britain's HMS Leopard near the coast of Virginia. Facing little resistance, the Leopard took 4 prisoners, but the incident triggered a series of embargoes between the two countries. Tensions grew when the U.S. expanded west, and Britain supported the Indians. Finally, with influence from Henry Clay and John Calhoun, 2 warhawks from the House, James Madison declared war on Great Britain. This means war! It began with the U.S. attacking Canada, part of the British Empire, and the Brits capturing portions of Michigan. Battles on American soil and waters continued for the next 2 years. Then in August of 1814, British General Robert Ross attacked America's capital, and Washington burned. Luckily, Dolly Madison, a very brave First Lady, saved George Washington's portrait from the flames. Then the British launched a 25-hour attack on Fort McHenry in Baltimore. Witnessing the event, Francis Scott Key is inspired to write a poem that later becomes the famous Star-Spangled Banner. Finally, the Treaty of Ghent is signed. War ends, and neither side loses land to the other. Word traveled pretty slow in those days, and the U.S. wins the Battle of New Orleans even after peace is declared. This makes General Andrew Jackson a major pop star of the day. So here it is in a nutshell. There was a big bully off the Virginia shore, so warhawks declared that it was time for war. There's 2 years of fighting with the White House ruined. Dolly saved George, and we got a new tune. No major changes, boundaries stayed the same, but one soldier won by gaining national fame.
That's the War of 1812 in 2 minutes.
Okay, so to go over the War of 1812, it was a conflict between America and Great Britain, or the North American colonies and Native Americans, from June 1812 to February 1815. Shortly after the time James Madison became the 4th president, the sailors were impressed by British Navy, so he decided to declare war on Great Britain. This was also known as the Second War of Independence, because it was the second time that we fought England to try and win our freedom back. There are many causes of the War of 1812, but one of the leading causes of the War of 1812 were the trade restrictions that were imposed on the United States by Great Britain. The British wanted to restrict American trade with France due to their ongoing war with France. The United States considered these restrictions illegal under international law, and Americans tolerated years of British restrictions on American shipping and trade. The next is Britain's seizure of American ships and impressment of sailors. Impressment is just forcing people into service, like in the Navy, and the British were impressing a lot of soldiers, roughly 10,000, and having them go into battle, and civilians were captured and told to serve or go to jail. And a lot of people who wanted to get away from British problems earlier just went ahead and served in the military. America's resentment of Britain. America and Britain were not in very good standing at the time. American belief that British were arming Native Americans and inciting them to riot. So British were encouraging Native Americans to hurt, harm, and kill Americans in any way. And then in Congress, the War Hawks are just looking for a fight, and they're going to persuade Congress to declare war on Britain. So during the War of 1812, we have the Battle of Fort McHenry, and Francis Scott Key was a little ways away from where the battle was going on, and we held strong against a large British force. So Francis Scott Key witnessed the battle, he sees the explosions, and he wrote a poem or a song that described how he felt, especially after seeing the American flag was still flying at the end of the battle. This was originally named Defense of Fort McHenry, but renamed Star Spangled Banner, which is our national anthem that we play today. In 1814, during the war, the British invaded the Washington, D.C., and they burnt the city and the White House, which caused the president to flee. Dolly Madison, who was the president's wife, saved a famous portrait of George Washington during the attack, which symbolized American independence and perseverance. The White House you see today has a little left over from the first White House, but is also brand new, relatively speaking. Britain was also fighting France, and troops were deployed there, but they had an insufficient number of troops, and they suffered losses, which helped lead to the Treaty of Ghent. The Treaty of Ghent was the peace treaty that ended the war, and both sides signed it on December 24th, 1814, in the city of Ghent, United Netherlands. By terms of the treaty, all conquered territory was to be returned, and commissions were planned to settle the boundary of the United States and Canada. The results of the War of 1812, America became more isolationist, and isolationism means a country's desire to stay out of other countries' affairs. Spurred westward migration. Migration is just a movement of large amounts of people from one place to another, especially into a new homeland, so jobs became scarce and Native Americans were weakened. It ended the Federalist Party, and it inspired nationalism. Nationalism is the loyalty to a nation and promotion of its interests above all others. And it made Andrew Jackson a hero after winning the Battle of New Orleans, 1815. New Orleans, the treaty was signed, the war was over, but they were still battling. So General Andrew Jackson defeated the British, who wanted to take the land gained in the Louisiana Purchase. The war was established U.S. as an independent and powerful nation, so there was no clear winner. We won some battles, but lost some. There was no territory gained or lost, and the Treaty of Ghent ended the war and restored good relationship between U.S. and Britain. So to go over those questions at the beginning, who was the President of the United States during the War of 1812? First we have Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was the 7th President of the United States, but during this time was the general that led and won the Battle of New Orleans. He served from 1829 to 1837, so this was not the correct answer. James Madison was the President of the United States during the War of 1812. He was the 4th President, and he served from 1809 to 1817. Shortly after winning fair-handedly in the election, James Madison declared war on Britain, which started the War of 1812. Next we have James Monroe. During the War of 1812, Monroe served in critical roles as Secretary of State and Secretary of War under President James Madison. He was the 5th President of the United States and served from 1817 to 1825, so this was not correct either. An explanation for Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was the 3rd President of the United States, and he served from 1801 to 1809. He decided not to run for the 4th term, but instead nominated his good friend James Madison as the Democratic-Republican candidate. Jefferson also helped create the Embargo Act in 1807, which was an act that meant the U.S. refused trade with any foreign country, which hurt the American economy, and both imports and exports were down, which was another cause of the war. My next question was what ended the War of 1812? And the Burlingame Treaty was a landmark treaty between the United States and China, amending the Treaty of Tientsin, one of the unequal treaties to establish formal friendly relations between the two nations, with the United States granting China the status of most favored nation in trade. The Oregon Treaty was not right because it was the Treaty of 1818 that set the boundary between the United States and British North America along the 49th parallel of north latitude from Minnesota to the Stony Mountains, which is now known as the Rocky Mountains. C. Treaty of Ghent was correct. Treaty of Ghent was a peace treaty that ended the War of 1812 between the United States and Britain. By terms of the treaty, all conquered territory was returned and commissions were planned to settle the boundaries of the United States and Canada. The Treaty of Limits was incorrect. It was between the United States and the Mexican states. And it was in 1828, a treaty between Mexico and the United States that confirmed the borders between the two states. So that was the end of my presentation. That's the War of 1812. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you.